It is the early morning of April 22nd, 2026. The MSC Francesca, a massive Panamanian-flagged cargo ship, is moving quietly through the Persian Gulf. For days, the vessel, along with several others belonging to the Mediterranean Shipping Company, the largest shipping firm on Earth, has been trapped. They've been hiding in plain sight, anchored in the Gulf, waiting for a window to escape the war zone. Today, the crew has made a decision. They are going to make a run for it. To do this, they employ a tactic known in the maritime industry as going dark. The crew turns off the ship's automated identification signal, or AIS. Under international maritime law, large vessels are mandated to broadcast their position to ensure safety in the world's waterways. But today, survival trumps the law. The Francesca goes completely silent on the radar. They maneuver toward the Strait of Hormuz, hoping to slip through the 39-kilometer-wide waterway undetected. But out here, nothing goes unnoticed. Suddenly, the water around the massive container ship begins to churn. Fast-approaching speedboats, bearing the insignia of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, swarm the Francesca. Heavily armed men aim their weapons at the bridge. In a matter of minutes, the vessel is hijacked. The IRGC accuses the crew of tampering with navigation systems and forces the massive ship toward the Iranian coast. Just miles away, two other ships are also intercepted. The Euphoria manages to survive an attack and limps toward an anchorage near the United Arab Emirates. But the Epaminondas, a Liberian-flagged vessel, is fired upon. Its bridge sustains heavy damage before it, too, is seized by Iranian forces. This is no random act of piracy. This is a calculated, desperate strike in the middle of a global-altering war. A war that has already claimed thousands of lives, sent global oil prices skyrocketing to $100 a barrel, and brought the United States and Iran to the brink of total annihilation. How did the world's most critical waterway become a naval battlefield? Why is a formal ceasefire being completely ignored at sea? And what happens when a cornered regime decides to drag the global economy down with it? This is the story of the 2026 US-Iran naval war.
To understand why Iranian gunboats are hijacking commercial ships on a Wednesday morning, we have to rewind to February 28, 2026. Following the total collapse of nuclear negotiations, the United States and Israel launch a massive, coordinated bombing campaign against Iran. The strikes are unprecedented in their scale. They target nuclear facilities, military installations, and government compounds. The death toll is staggering. According to official figures released by Iran's forensics chief, nearly 3,400 Iranians are killed in the ensuing weeks. The violence ripples outward. More than 2,200 people are killed in Lebanon as Israel and Hezbollah trade fire. 32 people die in the Gulf states, 23 in Israel, and the United States loses 13 service members in combat, with 2 additional non-combat deaths. But the most consequential casualty of the initial strikes is the architect of modern Iran himself. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is killed. The sudden decapitation of Iran's leadership throws the regime into chaos. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, takes control, but he is injured. The government's communication lines are shattered, and the inner circle is heavily fractured. For weeks, the skies over the Middle East are a nightmare of ballistic missiles, interceptor drones, and fighter jets. But a war of this magnitude is incredibly expensive, and it threatens to spiral into World War III. By April, both sides are looking for a way to hit pause. On April 8th, Pakistan steps in as a neutral mediator and successfully negotiates a 2-week ceasefire. On April 11th, the two sides meet face-to-face in Islamabad. The U.S. delegation is led by Vice President J.D. Vance. The Iranian side is led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. For 21 grueling hours, they sit in a room and argue.
But Washington and Tehran remain worlds apart on key sticking points. And the biggest sticking point of all is the water. President Donald Trump agrees to stop the bombings, but the very next day, April 12th, he makes a fateful announcement. The United States Navy will maintain a total blockade on Iranian shipping. American warships are stationed across the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, choking off Iran's ports. The U.S. recently boarded an Iranian-sanctioned tanker and outright seized a cargo ship called the Tuska that was attempting to bypass the blockade.
Trump's strategy is simple. Squeeze Iran financially until their fractured leadership submits to a unified peace proposal. In a late-night post on Truth Social, Trump lays out his rationale. Iran is collapsing financially. They want the Strait of Hormuz opened immediately, starving for cash, losing $500 million a day. He notes that the country's military and police are no longer receiving paychecks. But Iran is not a country that submits quietly. If the U.S. is going to choke their ports, Iran decides they will choke the rest of the world. Enter the Strait of Hormuz. It is one of the most important geographic choke points on the planet. At its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are just 2 miles wide in either direction. 1/5 of the world's total oil supply, millions of barrels a day, passes through this narrow strip of water. In retaliation to the U.S. blockade, Iran keeps the strait closed to Western-aligned trade. They declare that disrupting order and safety in the strait is their red line. Instantly, the global energy market panics. The price of Brent crude oil, the global benchmark, shoots up to around $100 per barrel. That is 50% higher than just a year ago. West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark, rises to $91 a barrel. The economic shockwave is felt at gas pumps and shipping terminals across the globe. The situation is so dire that military planners from over 30 nations convene at the United Kingdom's permanent joint headquarters in London. Their goal? To discuss a massive multinational naval mission. UK Defense Secretary John Healey states the obvious. International trade, energy security, and the stability of the global economy depend on freedom of navigation. But executing a multinational breach of the Strait of Hormuz against a hostile, heavily armed Iranian military is a logistical nightmare. It's a high-stakes game of chicken. The U.S. is starving Iran of supplies. Iran is starving the world of oil. And then, on April 21st, the ceasefire is set to expire. The world holds its breath. Will the bombs start falling again? At the last minute, President Trump unilaterally extends the ceasefire indefinitely. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres releases a statement calling it an important step toward de-escalation. But the words spoken in New York and Washington do not match the reality on the water. Iran's lead negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, takes to social media. In English, he trolls the U.S. over the high gas prices their blockade has created. Iranian embassies join in, sharing AI-generated images of Trump dressed as a pirate on a movie poster titled Pirates of the Hormuz. The underlying message is deadly serious. Iran will not negotiate with a gun to its head. As long as the U.S. blockade continues, the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. And as we saw with the hijacking of the MSC Francesca this morning, they are backing up their threats with force. While the regime projects absolute strength and defiance to the outside world, internally, the country is tearing itself apart. On the ground in Tehran, the mood is uneasy. 2 weeks into the ceasefire, daily life continues, but it feels like a city holding its breath. The heavy traffic of pre-war Tehran is gone. Many residents fled the capital before Trump's ceasefire extension, fearing the war could resume at any moment.
The authorities have worked at full capacity to clean up the debris from the intense US-Israeli bombing campaign, presenting an image of a pristine, unbroken city. Arsalan, a local shop owner, perfectly captures the mood of the Iranian working class. Speaking to a reporter, he says, "Are we back in limbo again? Are these guys going to Pakistan or what? It feels like they want war again, but how can they? Our prices are up and not many people come in to buy or even ask prices." Arsalan's economic struggles are shared by millions. Since February 28th, Iran has been under a near total internet blackout. The regime is terrified of a civilian uprising. In January, just before the war, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets demanding change. The government brutally cracked down, executing protesters and jailing dissidents. Now, with the economy in freefall, the government restricts internet access to control the narrative, giving access only to select groups like pro-establishment journalists, business owners, and doctors. The blackout is bleeding the country dry. An official from the Iranian Chamber of Commerce estimates that the internet outage costs the country $30 to $40 million a day in direct losses, and up to $80 million when factoring in indirect impacts. Out of a population of 90 million, roughly 10 million Iranians rely on stable internet for their jobs. Desperate times breed desperate measures. To bypass the regime's firewall, some Iranians are paying vast sums of money to buy illegal Starlink terminals smuggled into the country. But the regime's paranoia is turning deadly. To maintain its grip on power and quell fears of an uprising, the Iranian judiciary has resorted to extreme measures. They are executing people they accuse of being spies or saboteurs. Just this morning, a man named Mehdi Farid was hanged. The state claims he worked in a sensitive civil defense unit and used his access to share intelligence with Israel's Mossad. Yesterday, another protester, Amir Ali Mirjafari, was executed for allegedly setting fire to a mosque in Tehran. Human rights groups report that at least 14 people have been executed in recent weeks in closed-door, heavily criticized trials. Basiji militia commanders frequently appear on state television, warning the public that domestic dissent will be punished with the exact same lethal force used against foreign enemies. While the eyes of the world are locked on the Strait of Hormuz, the conflict is bleeding across borders, drawing in global superpowers and destabilizing neighboring regions. In Lebanon, a fragile 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was agreed upon on April 16th, but it is crumbling by the hour. Today, Lebanese state media reports that an Israeli drone strike hit a vehicle in the western Bekaa region, killing one person and injuring two others. The Israel Defense Forces issue warnings to residents to stay away from the Litani River, citing ongoing terrorist activities. In response, Hezbollah launches an attack on Israeli forces operating in southern Lebanon. But the crossfire is claiming international victims. A patrol belonging to UNIFIL, the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, comes under fire. A second French peacekeeper, Corporal Anissé Girardin, dies from his wounds. French President Emmanuel Macron takes to social media, blaming Hezbollah for the attack and warning that the entire ceasefire is being undermined by continued military operations. The tension is making people do unpredictable things. Today, the Israeli military has to intercept and arrest roughly 40 Israeli civilians who gathered at the border and attempted to infiltrate several hundred meters into the military-controlled buffer zone in Syria. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the United States is dealing with the logistical nightmare of fighting a potential two-front war. In Washington, rumors swirl that the U.S. had moved parts of its THAAD system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System used for intercepting ballistic missiles, out of South Korea and into the Middle East. This sparks massive anxiety in Seoul, leaving a key U.S. ally feeling vulnerable to a nuclear-armed North Korea. U.S. General Xavier Brunson is forced to testify before a Senate committee, confirming that while some radar components were moved ahead of the June strikes on Iran, the THAAD interceptors remain fully deployed on the Korean peninsula. And then there is the economic maneuvering. In an attempt to shore up alliances, President Trump floats the idea of a currency swap to financially assist the United Arab Emirates through the crisis. But the UAE pushes back. Through their embassy in Washington, they issue a polite but firm rejection. They emphasize their financial resilience, boasting of over $2 trillion in sovereign investment assets and $300 billion in foreign currency reserves. They want the world to know, we do not need an American bailout. Even China is stepping out of the shadows. The Chinese Foreign Ministry issues a stark public warning, stating that the Middle East is at a critical juncture between war and peace. Beijing relies heavily on Middle Eastern oil, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a direct threat to their economy. So, where does this leave us? As of this afternoon, April 22, 2026, the peace talks in Pakistan are entirely frozen. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance was supposed to depart for Islamabad yesterday. His bags are packed, his delegation is ready, but the trip is paused. Iran's UN ambassador stated overnight that as soon as the U.S. ends its naval blockade, the next round of negotiations can begin. But Washington views the blockade as its only leverage to force Tehran to dismantle its nuclear ambitions and cease funding proxy militias. The rhetoric is escalating rapidly. Republican Senator Roger Marshall goes on the Newsmax network and suggests that if peace talks fail in the coming weeks, the U.S. might have to go in and finish the job. He compares the situation to President Truman's decision to drop nuclear bombs on Japan, or Eisenhower launching D-Day. He says bluntly, "Our military is locked and loaded. The blockade is literally starving them. They can't feed themselves very long."
But U.S. intelligence paints a more concerning picture. Multiple officials warn that Iran is not the broken, defenseless nation politicians are portraying. They estimate that roughly 60% of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' naval arm and half of its ballistic missile stockpile survived the February bombings completely intact. And Iran wants to make sure the U.S. knows it. Last night, in the dark streets of Tehran, during a massive anti-U.S. demonstration, the Iranian armed forces paraded what appeared to be a ballistic missile launcher right through the crowd. This morning, the IRGC released a statement warning that if the fighting resumes, they will deliver crushing and unimaginable blows to remaining enemy assets in the region. For now, President Trump remains optimistic, texting the New York Post that a return to talks is possible within the next 36 to 72 hours. But as long as American warships choke the ports of Iran and Iranian gunboats hijack commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz, the word ceasefire means nothing. The standoff we are witnessing right now is the ultimate test of modern geopolitical leverage. It is a war fought not just with missiles and drones, but with shipping containers, internet cables, and barrels of oil. It is a conflict where a localized internet blackout destroys 10 million jobs, and a single hijacked ship in a narrow strait sends global markets into a tailspin. The world is waiting to see who blinks first. Will the United States lift the blockade and risk losing its leverage? Will Iran reopen the strait and risk financial collapse? Or will the shadow war at sea finally spill over, dragging the entire world into the abyss?